The prevalence of traumatic brain injury among youth in criminal justice is staggeringly high. The estimates range from a low estimate of 30 to 40% to almost 90% when it comes to young people who've been convicted of more serious offenses.
Just because someone has a brain injury, that in of itself does not equate criminal behavior. What really most of the time is happening is that the individual lacks the diagnosis of brain injury, lacks access to appropriate supports and rehabilitation in combination with the challenges associated with the brain injury makes them at risk for justice involvement. But the two are not necessarily synonymous.
What I've seen with clients over the years is that their difficulties with attention, comprehension, social interaction can place them at risk to be singled out by the justice system as being problematic, as not being remorseful, as being defiant, oppositional, when in fact their behavior is to a large part a function of the often undiagnosed and unaddressed TBI.
A traumatic brain injury has very wide and varied impacts on communication skills. It largely has an interplay on cognition and communication. So for young people who had a brain injury who have challenges with attention or memory or their general executive function skills, might have resulting challenges with processing information. And so if long streams of information is given, maybe only parts or whole of it is understood. And it could really make a person seem like quite obstinate in giving back information. And it could definitely be interpreted as an unwillingness to attend to instructions or inability to understand what's being said.
My name is Adam Bayandik. I'm a Reiki practitioner. I had a TBI when I was 15. It's hard for me to understand sometimes and explain stuff to people, and it's really hard to figure out words sometimes, to figure out what I have to explain to somebody. Yeah, I can't remember the new word or the name, so it's kind of hard for me to figure out things. Yeah. Every time my mom makes a joke, it's like I don't get it. Sometimes I'll think a joke's funny, but nobody else does. And it's like, somebody will be serious to me and I'm just laughing and smiling, right? It's like, it's kind of hard for me to tell when people are like really serious and stuff like that.
Peer relationships are such an essential part of one's identity. And when you've had an acquired brain injury, often you almost appear to your friends like a new person. Slowly, I noticed that a lot of people lose friends because their peers just do not quite know how to deal with this new person.
They really desire a social circle. One of the greatest predictors of increased conflict with the justice system is your social circle. They will seek friends wherever they can. The fact that the friend might be somebody who has a lengthy criminal history, who gives them bad advice or asks them to do things that are illegal is not something that clients necessarily consider as being a negative. What they're looking at is the social, is I've got this friend.
So you place these challenges in the context of the justice system, which inherently is a fast-paced, highly complex system with multiple persons. It's highly stressed. It makes it very challenging for individuals with brain injury, again, particularly from the perspective of being able to follow and understand what's going on, what's being said to them, understanding the social cues of what is expected of them, the way that they need to present and be serious and be remorseful and respectful to the individuals that they're speaking with. And then the ability for them to be able to express and tell a coherent story.
Sophisticated communication skills are required at every step of the criminal justice process, even for young people who never formally enter a courtroom. A lot of decisions are made from the very first police officer they meet. In all of those interactions, you need to be following this really complex, often abstract, often fast-paced language that's going on around you. And the stakes for not understanding it are extremely high.
Because legal systems are ultimately based around normative social behavior, individuals who can't perform well or quickly or efficiently that normative social behavior are going to be judged more harshly because of it. Kids or young persons with TBI who enter the legal system kind of have two strikes against them. It's harder for them to comply with the normative behaviors that form the basis of laws. And then it's harder for them to use social behavior to navigate the system that is kind of judging them for breaking those laws in the first place.
You know, the assumption is that the person is bad or they're misbehaving or this is deliberate. And when that's not the case with a lot of the clients that I see. But on the street, they're going to come to the attention of authorities much more easily. And I have a client who is a racialized client, so I have a client who's Black and is presenting with neurodevelopmental challenges in terms of their social interaction, their physical expression, saying things that are inappropriate to members of the public, that kind of thing. They're much more likely, obviously, to come to the attention of the authorities. And then that presents other issues. So the client comes into the justice system, is less likely to get bail, perhaps less likely to have people advocating for him or her, more likely to get a more serious sentence. These intersections of, you know, what you look like, how you speak, who you are perceived to be, all come together to be to your disadvantage when you're entering the justice system.
One of the things we know very clearly is that those who are most at risk of being on the streets, dying, or being imprisoned are those who are most marginalized. Who we criminalize is very much determined by the level of inequality experienced. When we look at the end result, we see the adverse impact of discrimination on the basis of sex, race, and in this case, disability, because we see that's predominantly who fills our prisons. It's not those who cause the greatest harm. It's those who have the least opportunity to actually participate in a meaningful way, whether it's in education, whether it's in employment, whether it's in community life. And so we have relegated those individuals oftentimes to the least effective, most expensive system that exists within, and the only one that can't say no, and that is our criminal legal and our prison systems.
There are social and environmental factors that are surrounding the lives of all the individuals who come into the system. And the exact same factors that we should care about from a TBI perspective are the exact same factors that we should care about from a law perspective, from a rehabilitative perspective, and from like an equity perspective.
So there's many strategies that one could use to support a young person with a TBI. You can slow down your words so that they have more time to process and to understand what's being said. Information could be written down, paired with talking about it, figuring out what it is that they've understood by maybe relaying to them that you know that you've given them a lot of information, and could they say it back to you in a way that they understood it. I think it's really important to modify the environment so that it's supportive to the young person. An environment that is loud and extremely fast-paced will not support a young person's ability to use strategies such as asking for information to be repeated or to really understand language that's being used. For a young person with a TBI, it's really essential for them to have a very strong support system. And this does include peers and family members and anybody that's important within their environment. Not only do they act as a source of communication support and helping them to understand their world, it gives them a sense of belonging. The risks of negative outcomes increases when young people don't have that social support.
We need to, wherever possible, we need to consider the factors behind the behaviors that led to the criminal sentencing. And we really want to focus on a rehabilitative lens. We want to stop that revolving door trajectory. We want to end the justice trajectory for the youth as soon as possible so that they don't navigate through to the adult justice system.
For a young person with a brain injury, their interaction with the criminal justice system may be the highest stakes event in their lives and may determine the trajectory of the rest of their life. So it's imperative for us to support them so that they have equal access and equal full participation in youth criminal justice, because communication is a human right.